I thought I knew what soulmates were, till a DNA test turned my wedding ring into a symbol of something I can even say out loud without my voice shaking. It wasn't cheating. It wasn't a secret baby. It was worse. Something so twisted I felt sick to my stomach every time I thought about it, because the man I had fallen in love with, the man I married, turned out to share more with me than just vows. He shared my blood. I'm 29 now, but when I met Daniel, I was 24. Fresh out of college, still figuring out how to adult without burning toast or overdrafting my bank account. I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for stable Wi-Fi and a job that didn't make me cry in the bathroom. But love, it found me. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. I'd just ducked into a little cafe near my office because I needed caffeine to survive the last 3 hours of the workday. The place smelled like espresso and fresh bread, and there he was, sitting alone by the window, reading a book, not scrolling on his phone, not pretending to be busy, actually reading. Something about him made me stop. His dark hair was a little messy, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he had that half smile you get when you're reading something you secretly enjoy. I ordered my coffee and found myself sitting 2 tables away. I don't know why I kept glancing at him, but eventually he caught me. And instead of looking away awkwardly, he smiled. And just like that, I was done for. Daniel and I clicked instantly. He was smart but not arrogant, funny but not in that I'm auditioning for a stand-up show way. We ended up talking for 2 hours, long after my lunch break had ended. By the end of the week, we'd been on our first date. By the end of the month, we were inseparable. Our families didn't meet right away, which, looking back, is ironic. We both had kind of complicated backgrounds. My mom raised me mostly on her own. My dad left when I was a baby. She had a big extended family, but we weren't super close with all of them. Daniel's parents had divorced when he was young, and he moved around a lot as a kid. So it wasn't unusual that we didn't compare family trees in detail. 6 months in, we moved in together. It was fast, but it felt right. He'd make me tea when I was stressed. I'd bring him snacks while he worked late. It was domestic bliss, or at least as close as you can get when your oven likes to set off the smoke alarm for no reason. A year later, he proposed. I said yes before he'd even finished asking. We had this intimate wedding. Just close friends and immediate family. My mom cried through the whole ceremony. His dad gave a toast that made everyone laugh and tear up at the same time. I thought this was it. My forever. For the first 2 years of our marriage, everything was easy. We traveled. We binge-watched terrible TV shows. We built IKEA furniture without breaking up. A true test of commitment. And then, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment something shifted, but it started with a harmless conversation at a family barbecue. My mom had invited her cousins over, people I hadn't seen since I was a kid. One of them, Aunt Linda, not a real aunt, just aunt in the family way, kept staring at Daniel. At first I thought she was just impressed with my handsome husband, but later she pulled me aside. "Sweetie," she said, "what's Daniel's last name again?" I told her, and she frowned. "That's funny. I used to know a man with that name. Lived 2 towns over from where we grew up. Looked a lot like him, actually." I brushed it off. Coincidences happen, right? But then, a week later, Daniel mentioned something strange. "You know," he said casually, "my grandmother on my dad's side used to talk about having relatives in your hometown. I wonder if that's true." We laughed about it at the time. "Imagine if we were related," I joked. "Yeah, imagine." At first, the maybe we're related thing was just a running joke between us. We'd tease each other. "Careful, cousin, pass me the salt," that sort of thing. Silly, harmless. But over time, it stopped being funny. It started with my mom. She called me a few days after that barbecue, her voice hesitant. "Honey, I've been thinking about what Aunt Linda said. You know Daniel's dad's first name?" I told her. She went quiet for a beat. "You know, I swear I've heard that name before. He went to school with your uncle. Small world, right?" "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. But inside, something shifted. Small world. That's what people say when the coincidences pile up and you start feeling that prickling sensation in your gut. The one that whispers it is not just coincidence anymore. Then came the family stories. Daniel and I were lying in bed one night, half asleep, when he mentioned that his dad used to visit a town near where I grew up. He'd go there every summer to see an old friend. "What town?" I asked. My eyes suddenly wide open. Said the name. My hometown? The next morning I dug through an old photo album my mom had given me. There it was, a blurry snapshot from some long-forgotten summer BBQ. My mom, my uncles, my cousins, and in the background, a tall man laughing with a group of people. He looked familiar. Too familiar. I didn't say anything to Daniel that day, but my stomach felt like it had dropped to the floor. Then at another family gathering, my uncle told a story I'd never heard before, about how my mom's cousin, who I barely knew, had dated a guy named Richard, and Richard just happened to be Daniel's dad's name. You'd like him, my uncle said. He was a real charmer, big smile. He even brought his little boy around once. I froze. Little boy. Daniel would have been about 5 or 6. After that, I couldn't unhear things. Every time Daniel's dad came up in conversation, I felt my heart race. Every coincidence felt like a clue in a mystery I didn't want to solve. It all came to a head one Saturday afternoon. Daniel and I were at his dad's house for a casual visit. I was in the living room, flipping through a box of old photos, while Daniel and his dad were outside talking. I found a picture of Daniel's grandmother, the one on his dad's side. My breath caught. I'd never met her, but her face. It was like looking at my own mother, just older, the same eyes, the same cheekbones. When Daniel came back inside, I asked him if she had ever lived near my hometown. He shrugged. I think so. Dad's mentioned it before. And that's when the unease became something else, a need to know. That night I called my mom. You know if there's any chance, any at all, that Daniel's family and ours might be connected? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she said, I don't know, but I think you need to find out, was the way she said it. Careful, almost guilty, that made me realize. She was just as unsettled as I was. The tipping point came a week later. I'd been idly scrolling through one of those genealogy websites where you can search public records. I typed in Daniel's dad's name, half expecting nothing, but there it was, a family tree. And smack in the middle of it, a branch that connected to my mother's maiden name. It wasn't direct, it wasn't obvious, but it was there. I stared at the screen for a long time, and I closed the laptop, my hand shaking. When Daniel got home from work, I didn't know how to bring it up, but he could tell something was wrong. What is it? He asked. I swallowed. I think we might be related. He laughed at first. That nervous laugh people do when they re-hoping you, re-joking, but I wasn't. I told him about the family tree, the photo of his grandmother, the stories from my uncle. His smile faded. So what do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when your perfect marriage starts to look like a tangled knot of shared bloodlines? We talked for hours that night about how maybe it was all just a weird coincidence, about how families in small towns sometimes overlap without realizing it. But the truth was, neither of us could shake the possibility. That's when the idea of a DNA test came up. At first, it was just to put the rumors to rest. But deep down, I think both of us knew we weren't going to like the answer. Still, we agreed. We needed the truth, no matter what it was. We didn't order the DNA kits right away. It was in tea because we didn't want to know. It was because pressing by now felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump. For a few days, we tiptoed around it. Daniel would say things like, "We're probably overthinking this," and I'd nod, even though my stomach was in knots. I wanted to believe him, but every time I looked at his face, I'd notice some feature. The curve of his nose, the shape of his jaw, and think, do I see that in my family too? The breaking point came one night while we were watching TV. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was a message from his dad, just a casual note about a family story. Something about how his grandmother had loved visiting the old farm near Maple Street. Maple Street was 3 blocks from the house I grew up in. 3 blocks. I felt my chest tighten. I looked at Daniel, and he must have seen something in my expression, because he set his phone down and said, "Okay, let's just do it." That same night, we went online and ordered 2 DNA test kits. The kind where you spit in a little tube and mail it off. The kind that promises answers in 6 to 8 weeks, but never tells you what those answers will cost you. The next few days felt weirdly tense. When the kits arrived, the box just sat on our kitchen counter for 3 whole days. Every time I walked past it, I'd feel my heartbeat pick up. On the 4th day, Daniel picked it up, shook it lightly, and said, "Let's just get this over with." We sat at the table, following the instructions like it was some delicate science experiment. Spit to the fill line, cap it, shake it. Seal it in the bag. Place in the prepaid box? Easy. But when I dropped them off at the mailbox, my hand lingered for a second. Once those boxes were gone, there was no taking it back. That night, lying in bed, I asked Daniel, "What do you think we'll find out?" He sighed. "Hopefully nothing. Hopefully we'll just laugh at ourselves for being paranoid." But the way he avoided looking at me told me he didn't fully believe that. The waiting was the worst part. Every time my phone buzzed with an email, my stomach did this little flip, thinking it might be the results. 6 weeks turned into 7. I started wondering if the universe was giving us more time to prepare, or more time to worry ourselves sick. In the meantime, I tried to distract myself. I buried myself in work, in errands, in anything that didn't involve thinking about shared DNA. But little moments kept creeping in. Like when I was sorting through old photos with my mom and she pulled out a picture of her father, my grandfather. I stared at it for a long time, realizing how much his profile reminded me of Daniel's. Or when Daniel's aunt came to visit, and the first thing she said when she saw me was, "Oh wow, you look so familiar. Has anyone ever told you that?" Yes, they had. By week 7, the tension between us was different. We weren't fighting, but we weren't exactly the same either. There was this undercurrent, like we were both holding our breath. One Saturday morning, we were eating breakfast, when Daniel suddenly put down his fork. "What if we are related?" he asked quietly. I didn't know how to answer. "Then we figure it out," I said. He gave a humorless laugh. "Figure it out? What does that even mean? We're married. It's not like we can just—" He trailed off, shaking his head. The truth was, neither of us knew what figure it out would look like. Divorce, therapy, pretending it never happened. Every option felt impossible. And then the email came. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, halfway through answering emails, when my phone lit up with the subject line, "Your DNA results are ready." My hands went cold. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I texted Daniel immediately. "It's here." "Eight." His reply came seconds later. "Don't open it without me." So I didn't. I sat there at my desk, staring at my phone like it might explode. That evening, we sat side by side on the couch, laptop open between us. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, Daniel said, "Ready?" No, I wasn't ready, but I nodded anyway. Clicked. The screen loaded slowly. That awful, spinning little circle that felt like it was mocking us. Then finally the results page appeared. At the top was the standard breakdown, percentages of ancestry, geographical regions, the kind of stuff people usually post online with captions like, "Wow, I'm 4% Scandinavian." But I didn't care about that. Neither did Daniel. We scrolled straight to the section labeled DNA matches. And there it was. At the very top, highlighted in bold letters, Daniel predicted relationship, close family, estimated shared DNA, 14.1%. I blinked, my brain scrambling to translate that into plain English. My eyes went to the little chart beside it, the one showing possible relationships based on shared DNA. And there, in neat little text, it read, half-sibling, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew, grandparent, grandchild, first cousin. My breath caught. "First cousin," I whispered, my voice shaking. Daniel just stared at the screen, his jaw clenched, his eyes unfocused, like he'd just been hit in the head. This could be wrong, right?" he said finally, his voice almost desperate. But the data was right there. The numbers, the probabilities, all screaming the same truth. Daniel and I weren't just married. We were blood relatives. I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach churned like I might be sick. It wasn't just the fact we were related, it was the closeness of it. First cousins. That meant one of my parents was a sibling to one of his parents. I turned to Daniel. "This means your dad. It's my mom's brother," he finished quietly. We just sat there, staring at each other, the reality sinking in like ice water. All those little coincidences, the family stories, the shared hometowns, the familiar faces, they weren't coincidences at all. They were clues we'd ignored because the truth was unthinkable. My mind flashed back to my childhood. I'd heard my mom mention a brother once, an older brother she was in tea close to. She'd never said much, only that they'd lost touch years ago. That brother was Daniel's father, and now I was married to his son. Couldn't breathe. I pushed the laptop away like it was toxic, stood up pacing the room, my hands shaking. I feel sick. I know, Daniel said, his voice low and hoarse.
Ass.
He hadn't moved from the couch. He was just staring at nothing, like his entire world had been erased. We didn't touch each other, didn't even come close. It was like an invisible wall had sprung up between us the moment we read those words. For the rest of that night, we barely spoke. I cried in the bathroom with the shower running, not because I wanted to hide it from him, but because the sound of my own sobs felt unbearable in the silence of the house. When I finally came out, Daniel was sitting in the dark, his face in his hands. He didn't look up when he said, "So, what now?" Didn't have an answer. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the DNA chart. That bold 14.1% burned into my brain. And every memory I had of us, our wedding, our first kiss, even the way he'd look at me across a crowded room, now felt like something twisted and wrong. The next morning, I called my mom. My voice was barely steady when I said, "We got the results." She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I'm so sorry, honey." And that was all I needed to know. She knew. I had known there was a possibility, and she hadn't told me. Daniel spoke to his father later that day. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I heard enough. The raised voice, the heavy pauses, the eventual sound of him hanging up without a goodbye. When he came back into the room, he just said he admitted it, and that was that. We didn't hug. We didn't cry together. Just sat in silence, both of us drowning in our own thoughts. The love I'd felt for Daniel didn't vanish instantly, but it became something heavy and unrecognizable. Something tangled up in guilt, betrayal, and the knowledge that the person I had built a life with was never supposed to be in that role at all. We both knew nothing would ever be the same. The day after the DNA results came in, our house felt like a morgue. No one was dead, but something had definitely died. The way we looked at each other, the way we moved around the kitchen, the way we used to reach for each other without thinking. Now, every touch felt wrong. We couldn't avoid the inevitable. We had to talk to our families. Daniel wanted to speak to his father alone first. I agreed. Not because I didn't want answers, but because I was sure I could handle being in the same room with the man who, apparently, was my uncle. When Daniel came back from that conversation, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. He admitted it, Daniel said flatly. Said he and your mom's family drifted apart years ago. But yeah, he's your mom's brother. I just sat there, my hands gripping the edge of the couch cushion like I might float away if I let go, and he never thought to mention it. I asked, my voice shaking. Daniel laughed bitterly. He said he didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered. Those 4 words rattled in my skull like a loose screw. It mattered to me. It mattered to Daniel. It mattered to every single vow we'd made at that altar. That night, I called my mom. I thought I was prepared, but hearing her voice almost broke me. "You knew," I said. No greeting, no small talk. Just those 2 words. She sighed. Long, heavy, full of years she'd kept this quiet, I suspected. I didn't know for sure. I suspected and didn't say anything. My voice cracked. "Mom, I married my cousin." There was a pause. "Honey, I didn't want to interfere." "You seemed so happy." Happy. That word stung like acid. Happiness built on a lie wasn't happiness at all. It was a trap you didn't see until it snapped shut. For the next week, we avoided each other's families. I stopped going to Sunday dinners at my mom's. Daniel ignored his dad's calls. We were living in the same house, but we may as well have been on opposite ends of the planet, and the silence was suffocating. We didn't talk about what we were going to do next, but it was there, hovering over us like a storm cloud, ready to burst. The breaking point came one night when Daniel walked into the kitchen and said, "I don't know how we keep going like this." I looked at him, feeling something deep in my chest crack. We don't. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud. The truth was, even if we could ignore the biology, we couldn't ignore what it had done to us emotionally. Every romantic memory was tainted. Every future plan felt contaminated. We decided to separate, I was screaming or door slamming, but with this exhausted mutual understanding that the life we'd built together was already gone. Telling people was another nightmare. Friends were shocked, some speechless, others blurting out awful attempts at humor. My best friend cried when I told her. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, like I'd just lost someone. In a way I had. The legal side wasn't simple either. Marriage between first cousins is technically legal in some states, but that didn't make it any less devastating. We filed for an annulment rather than a divorce, erasing it on paper, even if we couldn't erase it from memory. In the weeks that followed, there were moments when I caught myself missing him. Not as my husband, that idea now made me feel physically ill, but as my best friend. The person who knew how I took my coffee, who could tell by my breathing if I was asleep, who understood my dumb inside jokes. But every time nostalgia crept in, I'd see that DNA chart in my head, and the ache would turn cold. The confrontation phase didn't end with family talks and papers signed. It followed me into every interaction. At family gatherings, I could feel the sideways glances, the pity, the whispered, "That's the one who," behind my back. Daniel and I met once, after everything was official. We sat in a park, just talking. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't angry. It was two people picking through the wreckage of something neither of us had chosen. "I still care about you," he said. "I still care about you too," I admitted. "But we can't undo this." He nodded. "No, we can't." And that was the last time we saw each other in person. It's been over a year since that night on the couch when the DNA results pulled the floor out from under my life. A year since I learned that the man I loved wasn't just my husband. He was my blood. Some days it feels like it happened yesterday. Other days, it feels like a bad dream I woke up from, blurry at the edges but still heavy in my chest. When people hear my story now, they always ask the same thing. "How did you not know?" And I get it. From the outside, it's easy to think the signs should have been obvious. But in real life, love blinds you. You see coincidences as quirks. You write off similarities as just small-town stuff. You don't jump to, "I might be related to my spouse." Looking back, there were 1,000 little red flags. The shared hometowns, the family stories that almost lined up, the photos of relatives with faces that looked too familiar. But we never connected the dots because the picture they formed was too unthinkable. I've replayed that moment of discovery so many times in my head. The numbers on the screen, the silence between us, the way the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my shoulders. It wasn't just the biology that broke me. It was the betrayal of silence. My mom suspected and didn't say anything. Daniel's dad knew and kept it to himself. I used to think secrets protected people. I know they just set you up for a bigger, sharper kind of pain later. For months after the annulment, I felt like my identity had cracked. If my marriage, the thing I'd been most sure about in my adult life, was built on something so wrong, what else in my life wasn't what it seemed? Therapy helped. So did writing. So did long walks where I could just think without anyone's voice in my ear. And slowly, I started to see that the story wasn't just about what I lost. It was also about what I learned. Learn that love can be real and still be impossible. Learn that the truth, no matter how much it hurts, is always better than a lie you live with every day. And I learned that healing doesn't always mean going back to normal. Sometimes it means building a new normal from scratch. Do I hate Daniel? No, I hate what happened. I hate the silence that made it possible, but I don't hate him. He was just as blindsided as I was. We were victims of a choice made decades before we met. A choice to cut off communication, to let family drift apart until they became strangers. There are still moments when I catch myself wondering what if we'd never taken that test? Would we still be together, living in a happy bubble of ignorance? And if so, would that have been better? But then I remember, the truth doesn't stop existing just because you don't look at it. It was there all along. I would rather live with pain than with a lie. The hardest part now is family gatherings. Some relatives avoid the topic completely, pretending it never happened. Others can help themselves and bring it up like it some kind of tragic gossip. I've learned to politely shut it down, not because I'm ashamed, but because I'm not a story for their entertainment. When I tell my story now, it's not for the shock value. It's for the people who are sitting on their own something's not right feeling and are too scared to dig. I want them to know that yes, the truth might hurt, but living without it hurts longer. I've moved into a new apartment. I've started dating again, slowly, cautiously, making sure I know exactly where someone comes from, both emotionally and, well, genetically. It's almost a joke now when friends tease me. Did you check the family tree? I laugh, but it's a real part of my life now. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the version of my life where Daniel and I weren't related, where our wedding wasn't tainted, where our future wasn't something to mourn. I let myself miss him for a moment. The way he'd make me tea, the way he'd hold my hand in public like he never wanted to let go. And then I let that version go, because it doesn't exist. The truth is, I'll always care about him in some way. It's not as a husband, not even as a cousin, but as someone who walked through one of the hardest chapters of my life right beside me. And maybe that's the strange silver lining. We both survived it. We both found ways to keep going. Now, when I look back at our wedding photos, I don't feel the same gut punch I used to. I see a girl who didn't know the truth yet, who loved with her whole heart, who believed in forever. I don't hate her for not knowing. I just wish I could tell her you're going to be okay, 'cause I am. And that's the thing I hold on to. Sometimes the truth will break you before it sets you free. But once you're free, you'll never want to go back to the cage you didn't know you were in.